Now, there's certain elements we can look at technology and go, man, that's awesome.
Yeah.
But in general, is the technology leading us to moments of awe or moments of further activity, engagement, and energy burn of your brain that leads to exhaustion?
Yeah. I believe what the scriptures say, that God spoke. He made sound to create everything. By the word of the Lord, the heavens were made. Psalm 33 says, from the breath of his mouth come the starry host. And it's, that resonant frequency. I think that has part to do with it, that we're just echoing the way God created everything.
Hello, and welcome to Design for More, sponsored by Come and Reason Ministries and Honey Lake Clinic. I'm Dr. Tim Jennings. I'm joined today by James Johnson, our Chief of Chaplains, and Brett Durbin, one of our chaplains and also involved in our outreach and system partners.
Yep.
All right, great. And so today we're going to be talking about the science of awe. You guys, both in chaplaincy, pastorate. I'm wondering if awe is something that, were you guys taught awe in school, or is it just something kind of everybody understands, or what's your understanding and perspective of awe? And do we experience it outside of a religious experience? But go ahead, awe.
Well, I usually think of, I don't know, maybe because I was a very inquisitive kid. I think if things had gone a little different and God maybe did some different things in life, I would have been a scientist, because I just loved the natural world. I remember being a kid and just marveling at bugs crawling on the trees. I grew up on a farm, very outdoorsy kind of stuff. And, I would not have used the word awe, but I was always in wonder. I was captivated by the natural world. And every time something that would be new, I would discover, whether it's a beautiful sunset or trying to count the stars, trying to look at the vastness of the ocean. Those kind of things were definitely awe-inspiring. Even if that wasn't a word I would have used as a child, I was in wonder at those things. So I definitely think we can find it outside of quote unquote religion, but I think most of it does go back to God when we actually trace it back.
And the Bible actually says the heavens declare the glory of God and so forth. What would you like to say about anything about awe? And I'm going to ask you guys, what kinds of things, you already gave some examples of growing up where you felt awe, but
Yeah, I mean, having several kids, one interesting thing to me is that a lot of times little kids, when they see something that they think is precious, or they think it's really great, they say, "Aw." And it's this natural response that they give. And that's always caught me off guard, because when I see it and I think of the word awe and awe-inspiring and awesome and all, to me, it's intriguing that children just kind of automatically say that. I don't think it's something they've learned. And maybe it is this something they've learned, but every one of mine have done it, and they've done it at a really early age. And so they may be looking at a scene in nature or something large, and they're like, "Oh," and so, maybe nothing, but that's kind of what hit my mind when you talking about it as well, just being a child and thinking about that kind of childlike innocence, and maybe seeing God in creation just by saying something as simple as "awe." But
and so, no, I would agree with that. We think children, everything is kind of new.
mhm.
It's kind of exploration, discovery, and it's like beyond their comprehension. Is this the elements of kind of awe, wonder?
All right.
Wow,
Mhm.
awe. Okay. What kinds of things have stimulated you in your life? Do you have any like memories that as you think about it, they're still like, that was awesome, awe-inspiring?
Yeah, you mentioned a couple of the nature ones, just is really cool for me as a kid to see it. But I remember, even as a very rural area child, going to a big city for the first time and seeing these massive buildings that we've built, or growing up in more small, simple church buildings, going to massive cathedrals, things that just make you just, wow, this we can build this kind of stuff, or these kind of things exist, or whether we're looking at a nature scene, just these big overwhelming things that cause us to just be in marvel of awe. That not only can we create these things, but I think that personally, I think that goes back to God made us in his image. And so when we are doing things that honor him, we can actually be creative as well, that we can create these massive things, or, learning something about how genetics work, how cool it's been to, I know we're all dads, that seeing our kids and what kind of traits they take on from the parents just naturally, or, the awe of seeing things again. It's just kind of a cool process. Those are some of the things that pop in my mind.
Yeah, yeah, and I think to kind of stem off of that, the things that stand out in my mind are that first time you see your child. I mean, that is when they say there's a breathtaking moment where your breath is taken away a little bit, it's such a miraculous moment, yet it happens all the time. And I know this doesn't apply to everybody, but that first time I saw my child, and it goes for all of them, not just the first one.
Because you got 7.
Yeah, we do have a lot of kids. And, it's an awe-inspiring moment. You can't think of anything in my mind. All I think about is God is great.
Mhm.
Uh, in my experience, there's been times when you're out dark night looking at the stars on a clear night and just the vastness of the universe. It's really kind of humbling and
Mhm.
awe-inspiring. So I've had that, and there's 2 others that really stand out in my and several years back, I went to Tromsø, Norway, which is up in the Arctic Circle, way at the very. If you look at the globe, it's actually you're standing on the top of the world in November, and went out and saw the Northern Lights,
Mm. So
and
cool.
it was just incredible, awe-inspiring. And then I was about 5 years or so ago able to be at the center of a full total eclipse.
Mm.
And that was, now I've seen partial eclipses, but the total eclipse, I don't know if you've ever been in one when it was totality. It was awesome. I mean, the midday, the temperature drops. The birds all start chirping. The dew, you actually get dew on things that are sitting there as the moon and you can look up at the sun without the solar glasses at totality, and you see this fire just because you see the moon in the center, and you see this fire, and it's not just visual. There's actually an ambiance change, and I could see why that in the ancients, that the shamans and stuff that could predict the lunar cycles and so forth, we're able to use this in some type of like spiritual way to manipulate masses, because it really creates an awesome experience. And of course, knowing God and who we are, it didn't have that negative on me. It was just really just incredible. So those are some of the awe moments. Um, in your journey as pastors or chaplains, have you found that awe is in any way beneficial towards spiritual development?
Especially when we talk about the idea of forgiveness and reconciliation and restoration, and especially in our relationship with God, that when we actually understand the depravity of our evil, just the selfishness. One of the things that we can do, and I think is part of this desire why the cultures, and even today we still strive to make the pagan gods, the artificial gods, in our own image. We want them to be more human because then they have faults and failures like we do. But when we actually see the depths of our depravity, and we see the absolute purity of God, and then his willingness to do whatever it took to get a relationship with us again, to make restoration possible, when people really get that, it becomes more than just a Sunday school story, or a song that we sang from childhood. It actually is, wow, God, you would do that for me.
Mm-hmm.
And that is really, I think, very important in the heart and mind change process, for us to actually understand, the scriptures tell us that our righteousness is filthy rags compared to God's purity.
So there's an awe. We were talking in the experiences,
Mhm.
awe from actual experiencing creation, or that birth, which is a creation element as well. But now you're, and I think this is truly important, describing an awe that comes from comprehending God in a understanding way, not
Mhm.
just a physical experience way.
Yes.
And the significance of who he is, who we are, what he's done for us, the sacrifice he's made, the lengths of his love to redeem us, that when you allow that to settle, it's awe-inspiring.
Mhm.
There's a truth
Yeah.
there. Yeah. Want to talk a little about the brain and awe. Have you guys heard of default mode network?
I just did.
Okay. So default, it's actually, that's the actual name. You can look it up. It's called default mode network. To me, it's easier to understand if you take the word mode out and just go default network. Okay. This is the network in your brain that is active when you're not intentionally engaged in thinking. So if you're not, when you're focused on problem solving, when you're weighing and wrestling with an issue, when you're concentrating on something, default mode network is not active. That's your executive network. That's your ability to reason and think. Executive network, reason, think, problem solve, strategize, plan, wrestle through things. That's when you're really thinking things. That's executive network. Okay. Default mode network is when you're kind of just going along and not really thinking about anything. It's your automated default baseline thought patterns, the underlying filter or processes, which are almost essentially, and this is what the data shows, self-referenced. The patterns of thinking, of insecurity. Should I have said that? Maybe I did this wrong. What are people thinking about me? This type of thing. Okay. It's a self-referenced thought pattern is the default mode network. What's going on with me? How am I doing? Am I okay? This kind of stuff. And if you had trauma in your childhood or neglect or abandonment, then it inculcates a very negative pattern of default mode network. Lots of insecurities. Okay. And from a spiritual perspective, we're born in sin, conceived in iniquity. We have an insecure fear spirit we inherit from Adam. God did not give us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and a sound mind. And so the natural carnal heart or mind is a fear-based, self-reference, survival, worry kind of default. That's the default. And this is where most people live. What the data shows is that when you experience something that causes awe, it actually shuts off default mode network. It actually draws you out to think about something else than yourself. That neurobiologically, we see the different circuits activate and the default quiets. And this is critical because it goes to what biblical meditation is about.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at biblical meditation, and there's all kinds of things the Bible tells us to meditate upon, but the Bible meditation is always on some aspect of God, the infinite one, which is awe-inspiring. It could be his creation, could be his statutes, his law, his deliverances of us in the past, his mighty works, his hand, his sacrifice in Christ. In other words, it's drawing us to consider something from an infinite, awesome being, which is supposed to be awe-inspiring. That's biblical meditation, contemplation of something bigger and other than us that inspires us, that shuts off the default mode of insecurity and self-reference, which is contrary to Eastern meditation. Eastern meditation is an emptying, repetitive mantra that actually focuses on nothing and does not inspire awe. So anyway, I just wanted to share that because there is a neurobiological basis, and we go back to the biblical principles and we find that this is actually very healthy because as we become more self-referenced, we become more fearful. And that actually causes, anxiety, stress, or cortisol levels go up. It increases risk of not just anxiety disorders, but depression and relationship problems. But as we focus on God and we experience awe and calm that, then we're open to actual have truths come in. And over the course of time, we can experience a new motivation of love and trust. And the default mode network, we stop our default thinking about ourselves. We've connected, and our default is thinking about praising God, thankful for this. And have you experienced that, from an earlier time in your life? Maybe you're walking around thinking about self. You actually walk many times. You're praising God for your children, and you're thankful. You see something, a beautiful bird. Thank you, God, for that. And your default mode network is going somewhere else.
Wow.
Yeah, it's interesting.
And awe is involved in that.
And that makes a lot of sense. And I guess the thing that my brain kind of goes to is that, when you're younger, it seems like it's easier to find things to externalize on, to focus on that are outside of ourselves. And for some reason, I don't know if it's just routine. I don't know if it's the accomplishment of goals, or just the greater understanding of life. But it almost seems like it's very difficult as we move through life to find more things to experience wonder about in our personal life, as far as, I'm no longer in awe of, okay, I accomplished that goal, or it was awesome to, go on that vacation and see that side that I'd never been at before, that the law of diminishing returns kind of comes in. And I use, I remember, hopefully you guys probably felt the same way on your wedding day, see my wife, come down the aisle. That was an awesome moment, literally.
Oh, don't follow up on that. That was, but you know what? No.
But now, just like our children, right? They were amazing when they were born, but now sometimes they frustrate me. Sometimes they're knuckleheads. I'm like, oh, come on, But I've lost that wonder. And is there something in the way our brain works with that diminishing returns process that impacts that default network as far as like, is it harder to get away from that
Well,
as we
I
get
was
older?
actually going, you're going in the same direction I was going, so thank you for that. I was going to ask the question because of what Brett said. He sees in his kids this awe, and it seems to be all just spontaneous and
Mhm.
common. And that what you were saying, I think we all noticed that maybe there's less of that as adults. Does something happen in our development that, or are there things we can identify that are interfering with our experience of all that is still available to us, but we're not availing ourselves of it because something else is kind of in the way? Any thoughts about that? Because that's kind of the same question you're asking.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Yeah, but I'm asking it maybe more like diagnostic or clinical, looking at, are there stuff that we're maybe not thought of? It may not be evil in and of itself that we're talking about, but something that is just, for instance, busyness of life.
Yeah.
Can busyness of life get in the way of awe?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you just look at as we grow older, I mean, how often do we just become jaded about certain things, And I think that maybe that almost that numbness to certain things that used to give us awe, we just kind of look at and pass by and we don't think anything of. I think that's one of the important things about what you were hitting on earlier is, creation really it it points towards the creator, and so when we can have those times of quiet and
Mhm.
maybe look at what God's done and see what he's doing in your life instead of focused on, like you said, the busyness or what's going wrong or, yeah, this isn't good or, you know, we need to be reminded that God is God and we're not, and I think sometimes when we get busy and we get to that point where, yeah, something probably has happened and you can speak much more to the neurological side of this.
I'm not looking neuro. I'm just looking at life.
Yeah.
Does life, do we allow, does sometimes things happen, choices we make for good cause
Mhm.
actually interfere with good outcomes? For instance, is it a good cause to go to work, make money so you can put food on the table for your children? These good causes.
Yes.
Yes. Is it a good cause to, do ministry with your church? Is it a good cause to volunteer with your children's school and volunteer coach and a good cause?
Right.
And can we pile up good causes so much that you overextend your human abilities, limitations, and you have no time for awe? You're just busy with good stuff, and busy with the good stuff, you actually start encroaching on sleep. You encroach on, Sabbath rest, time with God and weekends, time away with family, because you're just, I see this in pastors.
Mhm.
They got a church to minister. They're doing good cause.
Yeah.
Okay, so
No.
I mean, is it possible the busyness of the good causes can actually, with good heart, without actually thinking through and setting limits,
Oh, sure, and, we
interfere with health and then maybe these moments of awe?
Yeah, and I guess started out in, education studying the psychology of how people have fun, and we talk a lot about how technology is beneficial and negative, that, it's great to have electricity, it's great to have indoor plumbing, it's great to have the internet. I mean, we put, according to Dr. Jay Strack, we put as much information on the internet every single day as Alexander the Great had in his great library. I mean, we just have all this access to information, but one of the things that used to happen, that I think about sometimes is the sun went down and the work had to end because you couldn't see. I mean, you were limited by, the fireplace, and people would sit around and eventually they'd look up at the stars or they would settle in and rest, and they would kind of have to go to sleep because that's just how the rhythm of the world worked. And now we don't have those things. That I've been places where, golly, the lights of the city are so bright you can't see the stars. And you're so busy with because of technology that you never have to stop working or even at least entertaining ourselves. We've
So
got
you're bringing in a new one,
Mhm,
and,
okay.
no, it's good. I'm glad you are. The busyness,
Right.
now, technology. Now, there's certain elements we can look at technology and go, man, that's awesome.
Yeah.
But in general, is the technology leading us to moments of awe or moments of further activity, engagement, and energy burn of your brain that leads to exhaustion?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they're definitely more negative than positives for sure. You know, I can think of a lot of cool things we're grateful for, the medical advancements we've made that allowed better surgeries, better medical operations that didn't used to be possible. I mean, the ability for us to keep children alive that are born preterm, continues to grow, and those are really cool things. But I think by and large, the negative of as cool as it is that I have this smart device in my pocket that can give me access to all this information, oftentimes it distracts me from the things in life that really matter and keeps me, it keeps my focus away from those awesome moments, and keeps me from, being able to just sit back and truly rest.
Is there a difference between contemplating God's creation and being in God's creation? For instance, we're sitting in a room with bright lights, and we can reflect on and contemplate trees, flowers, birds, lots of aspects of God's nature. Is that the same as actually going out and being in and experiencing God's nature? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say no.
What?
The thing that really comes to mind though for me is, especially like during seminary, you're constantly learning. It's very much it's headspace. You're trying to learn as much as you can, but then to me, it was the times that I was able to actually go out and do the things that we're learning about. Be in that ministry that you're studying about so much. In the things of the Bible, and so you're outliving that, and you're in relationship with people, and that to me is always so much more of an experience of God, kind of like what you're talking about. You're in it. You're not just contemplating it. You're actually out there doing it. And I would say the same even working here at Honey Lake. I mean, a lot of times I'm getting all my tasks done, doing all this, but then I'll be walking across campus and I end up in a conversation with a patient. And that little 20-minute conversation can end up being the greatest part of my day. It's relational. You're experiencing something that feels like, well, God maybe just set this up. Maybe this was a moment I was supposed to have. So yeah, I think there's definitely a big difference in the two.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's definitely a vast separation between cognitive understanding, as vital as that can be, and as a guy that loves academics and loves learning, fact based kinds of things. There's a very big difference between what I actually hear and learn about and what I actually experience. I'm reminded of the passage at the end of the book of Job where Job has after he experiences the presence of God, he says, "Before I'd only heard about you, but now I've seen you." And that's what led him to that repentant moment, that changing the way he thought about God.
There's a difference between taking a class and learning the mechanics and physics of swimming and getting in the water and learning how to swim.
That's right. Yeah.
They're not the same. And the data shows that's true for our being as well. Getting out into nature has a calming effect on our entire body. Our cortisol levels, our stress levels, our heart rates, our heart rate irritability drops. Studies on children who have outdoor classrooms versus indoor classrooms. Outdoor classrooms, they learn better. They have better behavior. They're more socially appropriate. Something about being in the nature. Urban environments actually are very stressful. People rest better after a couple of days in nature than if they are always exposed to the lights in the urban environment type situation. So touching the earth, actually touching the earth with your skin causes electrons to move in from the earth. Lightning, by the way, is mostly electrons moving from the earth to the sky. And the earth is a big electron donor. And when you touch the earth, electrons come into your body and activate anti-inflammatory enzymes that help your body's immune system and help you reduce aches and pains. And you just actually are healthier when you do. That's why people often feel much better after they spend a weekend at the beach, because they've gone into the water, salt water, which conducts electrons very well into their body. So being out in nature is healthier than just, say, watching nature videos on TV.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so there's an experiential, and I think our modern society has cut people off sometimes. And then you mentioned the relationships, human relationships. We again back to the social media. They talk social media. What's the actual function of social media? To cut people off from social connections.
Yeah.
That's what it does. It has the pretense of actually connecting. There's a big difference. And when people talk about, if you're isolated, maybe you're an astronaut out on, and there's a few that go out to the space station for months. Okay, you're a researcher in one of the Arctic, research centers in Antarctica. Okay, so you're really cut off from human connections by reality. Then this is a wonderful thing where you can actually have that interaction, and I enjoy that I can FaceTime with my grandkids who aren't the same town. But at the end of the day, if your relationships are built off of internet and digital communication, not in-person communication, they're not the same.
No.
They actually end up being much more artificial. You don't have to actually, brush your teeth before you have that. You don't have to take a shower.
Right.
You don't have to actually consider your presentation, how you're dressed. If you get bored and you're in a group chat online, you can hit mute and put something else on while you stay in. Isn't it true?
Absolutely.
Okay. So it has the pretense where people, but and if that's all you have, it's wonderful. But people should not fall into the trap of thinking that is actually an equal substitute from in-person connection.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And if you, you know, I've experienced this numerous times living in the same town where a lot of people I connect with in social media, and you'll bump into somebody in the store and it's just weird because everything that's been going on in their life because they've been posting it on their social media platform. But when you see them in person and start like asking questions like, oh, that was really cool that there's a weirdness. I heard somebody say one time, the word media means in the middle. And so a lot of times social media gets actually in the middle of our social network and our actual relationships. And that was a really powerful experience for me to kind of make that recognition that, yeah, I know a lot about what's going in your life, but I'm not living life with you. And that's very different.
Have you found any helpful things, either for you or people you've counseled on, that can enhance their frequency and experience of awe? Any suggestions or things you've done or things? I mean, obviously we can intuit, oh, get out to nature more.
Mm-hmm.
But anything that you've can make routine or have recommended to people?
Two of the things that have really helped me, the first is kind of just learning to be a lover of learning. I think one of the things that can happen in routine is that we kind of fall into this trap, and I think there's a certain comfort to it, to this belief that we've got it all figured out, that we know everything there is about the world. We know, all this stuff about space, and we know a lot. We've learned, obviously, know a lot more than we knew 50 years ago, 100 years ago. But this weird lie that we can kind of tell ourselves that we know everything now and there's nothing more to learn. Well, there's so much more out there to constantly get in connection of learning something new every day and realizing, wow, there's just so much new things in life to have wonder about. But I really love, maybe it's just because I am a musician, but I love music. I think there's just something really cool and experiential about playing music, listening to music, the being able to put my headphones on and put a song on and experience all the different, levels and the ambience of it. That is, I think that's a really big reason why since the beginning of at least of recorded scripture that people worshiped God through music. There's this connection of just melodies and using words, not just saying words out loud, but singing words versus just saying words. There's a connection of wonder to that to me as well. And I found a lot of help with people that say, hey, take 5-10 minutes out of your day and just listen to a really, really, powerful or something, that type of music that just kind of jogs that, and it creates more of that wonder, that awe in their life. Those two things are helpful for me.
Let's talk about music a little bit then. The brain research shows that music activates basically the entire brain, not just the auditory cortex. You're activating areas of mood, areas of stress processing, areas of pain processing, areas of impulse control, memory. Studies done on children who listen to music regularly and take music lessons versus those who don't. They have better memory. They have better cognitive performance. So music is really important for brain development. People who listen to music regularly have a positive effect on reducing anxiety, improving depression. And studies on post-stroke individuals, looking at those who listen to music versus those who listen to audiobooks versus those who didn't listen to anything at all. Those who listened to music regularly showed better recovery in domains of verbal memory and focused attention. in the stroke recovery period than those who didn't. So it was activating in some way neural recovery and rebuilding of neurons. So music's really important, but does that mean all music is healthy?
No.
And
No.
and I want to talk about that too. The Hebrew word that's translated as Lucifer in the Bible, the Hebrew word Hallel,
Mhm.
okay, Helel or Halal, depending on which version you're reading, and it brilliant one or flash of light or bright light, but it's the base root for the word hallelujah.
Mhm.
That's the Hebrew base of hallelujah.
Yeah.
And so some Christian traditions, and I think some Hebrew traditions or Jewish traditions, believe that Lucifer was like a heavenly choir master.
Mhm.
Have you heard this
Oh, yeah.
as well?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so then is it possible the enemy of good can take this good gift of music and use it to harm?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you look at hate to throw it all under the bus, but most popular music that I tend to stumble across or that my kids are listening to, a lot of times I hear it, I think, "What did they just say?" Now,
Mhm.
I know it was the same for me. I mean, I was
Oh,
a
for sure.
child of the '90s when, gangster rap was what everyone listened to,
Mhm.
no matter where you were from, and, not good lyrics. It wasn't good stuff that was going in, and so what was that actually doing to me? I think the messaging, can be very damaging, through music because I do believe there is there's something natural in us that appreciates music because this is coming from a guy that, I know, James is very musically talented. I have zero musical ability. I cannot sing. I've tried multiple instruments when I was a kid. None of them took, but I love music.
And there's a positive effect on you to listen
Absolutely.
if it's healthy music.
Yeah.
But you mentioned rap. The studies show that adolescents, young people listening to rap, versus those who don't, those who listen to rap are 3 times more likely to hit a teacher, 2.5 times more likely to have been arrested, and 2 times more likely to have had multiple sexual partners, and 1.5 times more likely to have acquired new sexually transmitted disease, used drugs, used alcohol in the 12-month period the previous to the study if they were a rap listener than those who aren't.
Right, like secular rap, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, I know that it's rare. There are, Christian rap artists, but they're far more rare than what you hear on the radio for sure.
So we'll come to that in a minute.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I we'll come to that in a minute. Okay.
Okay.
Watching pop and videos increase the risk of alcohol consumption by 31% in adolescents. Okay. So exposure to sexual content in music increase in white adolescents aged 12 to 14. Those who had the highest intake of the music with sexual content were 2.5 times more likely to have had sex in the next 2 years than those who didn't. So it has an impact. It has an influence. The biblical principle,
Mhm.
Philippians 4, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, right, pure, lovely, good, of good report, excellent, praiseworthy. Okay, is the music fit that? If it's not, you probably don't need to be doing it. So I think there's 3 elements when we look at music. One is I think you were suggesting right there was the lyrics.
Yeah.
What are the lyrics themselves? The lyrics are corrupt. It doesn't really matter what the style of music is.
Mhm.
So
It's
that's
the
first.
messaging.
It's
Yeah.
the messaging. But the second is, though, what is the emotional impact on
Mhm.
people, even with good lyrics?
Yes.
Does it actually bring a sense of calm, joy, peace, relaxation? Do you get hyped up? Do you get agitated? Does it help you unwind? Does it make you more frustrated, irritated? And music can actually affect your moods this way,
Oh, yeah.
regardless of the lyrics.
Mhm.
Regardless of the lyrics, the music. And then the third I tell parents to look at is the impact on behavior. Is your children listening to this? Are they actually becoming more pleasant, more cooperative, more rebellious, more obstinate? Are they keeping up with their duties, chores, homework? Are they falling behind? Okay, looking at behavior. Healthy music will not interfere with function. It'll actually enhance and improve function.
Sure.
And so classically, they've looked at them like the music that has been shown to be very good for cognitive development, brain development, memory development, is the Baroque 10 hertz type music, the classical music.
Oh yeah.
Okay, it's actually very good for firing the neural patterns in ways that enhance your capacity to pay attention, learn, focus, concentrate, and so forth. But regardless of all that, there's also another element, and that is volume. Okay, if you take the best Mozart and you crank it so much that it becomes the sound of a jet engine, that loud, you're actually causing physiological neural damage, and that is actually harmful. Will cause stress to the body, even if it's so. So the volume can't be harmful volume or pain-inducing volume, if that makes sense. So, but I actually think that the rap and the heavy some of that kind of, it's dissonant.
Yes.
And dissonant sounds, the body is not relaxing. It actually causes stress to the body. So even with good lyrics, then, and this is my view of how the devil tricks not by making everything he does 100% bad. He'll take some good, and I mean, how much feces do you need in your water before you don't want to drink it?
That's right.
Okay, it's like, well, that's 98% water. It's only 2% feces.
Yeah.
Okay.
Percent too much.
Okay. I mean, but that's a biblical metaphor about the
Very
spring,
much.
right? And the sewer. Okay. But that's how he might put good lyrics in, but then put the style of music in such a way that it causes increasing stress, activates, increases cortisol levels, interferes with sleep. And this has a negative consequence.
Well, and there's a reason why, and of course, thankfully, a lot of these things have been outlawed when it comes to. We used to, talk about different types of extreme interrogation techniques the military used to have, and government things that they would do. Some of that sensory deprivation or overload, and they would play music at extremely loud levels or styles of music that do and create that agitation. So. It would be very foolish of me to get ready to bed by listening to, very hard rock, upbeat tempo. It's not going to help calm me by any means. So, and being cognizant of that is huge.
And so I've had Christians kind of criticize certain, let's say, like, I don't want to name a band, but let's say more in the style of pop or rock, but with Christian lyrics. And my view is that they're bridges.
Yes.
Okay, there are people that are coming to the Lord that their brains are very much used to listening to certain types of music, and it's really hard for them to go right into your hymns,
Right.
your classic hymns. And so some of this more upbeat music is to me is like a bridge where they can actually still have the style of music they're used to, but now they're actually getting uplifting messaging that keeps them in a hopefully, because it's leading them to think of the Lord in an awe-inspiring way. But for the person that maybe just loves the Baroque, that would be very stressful to hear, and it would not be uplifting for them. And so this is why I don't make a hard rule on it. Leave that person, to be led by the Holy Spirit. But I think some music is clearly more uplifting than other music.
Oh yeah, and I think you hit a really important point to say. Not just the lyrics are huge, but what emotion does the style evoke? And that's very important to pay attention to. But I know for me, that was a game changer as a teenager when my youth pastor, I lost a bet to him that he said, and I said, oh, there's no Christian music I like, because I was thinking of more of the stuffier old school stuff that my grandparents listened to, and I was very pleased to find out. But like you said, those things do evoke emotions, even though I was grateful to find Christian rock bands, Christian, pop bands, things like that were more like what I listened to on the radio. That's what got me into Christian music for sure, but it definitely evokes a certain emotion in the style.
So in bringing this together now with what was said earlier about relationship, about experience, about awe, there's an aspect of congregational singing, which I think the churches have lost with their praise and worship.
Yeah.
I'll be honest.
Yeah.
Praise and worship is much more entertainment, where the audiences will stand, but it doesn't have that same resonance as when the congregation themselves is the source of the music and their voices are lifting together.
1000% agree.
And there's data that shows that the old hymns, that when we sing them together, it has a resonance, and you can actually see where brains start to kind of harmonize and sync.
Mm-hmm.
It's also why in the military they march together,
Mm-hmm.
movement together, the responsive readings together, the singing together brings a community and a cohesion to the group, and helps move out the spirit of competition and brings the spirit of unity together when it's done.
Yeah.
Have you seen this?
Oh,
Or
yeah.
yes, it is very much so. And I think the praise, worship stuff that we've gotten into and some of the, not that there's not a place for that, but I think if we don't, my recommendation would be have some of that, but always have, 2 or 3. If you're going to have a 45-minute praise session, which many of them do, have 15 minutes of that where you're doing maybe a few of the traditional hymns for the church to sing. I know one of the YouTube videos that seems to have gone viral was um, a video in a big stadium in Texas filled where they actually sang an old hymn. And the praise band, they actually went basically almost a cappella there, and the whole stadium joined in. How great thou art is what they sang. Do you know which one I'm talking about?
So,
Yeah, you've seen it. Okay. And do you see how there was a sense of it shifted when they moved to that from just everybody just holding their hands up while the band is singing.
Right.
well, and I think, I mean, how would you compare it to, or I guess how much of it would be generational too? Would it be, say there are definitely, I totally get what you're saying about the difference in the two. And I'm kind of unique, I guess, in a generation where we did do a lot of hymns when I was younger, but then it was transitioning into this more praise and worship style, and yet there are certain praise and worship songs that everyone seems to know that they can stop playing instruments and everyone keeps singing it, and it feels very much like a hymn like you're describing. And so I wonder how much of it is that. Whereas if you take a younger group and it's like, oh, this is a song that we all know and connect to and feel like it's our expression to God, and we can do the same thing in a stadium, would it be different than a hymn?
So not necessarily. No,
Yeah.
it's the unity, the singing together.
Mhm.
That is the element.
Yeah.
I think it's harder though with the praise band with their instruments and volume
Yeah.
for that connection to be made. Even when
fair.
they're
Yeah.
even when they're singing along, you don't have the sense where your voice is joining with the other voice. You're drowned out by the volume.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that is a lot of the time too.
Yes,
So
and so but to the degree they stop playing and the whole church or the group keeps singing together, that's when you actually start building that unity. And this is why in the military, they not only march, they sing cadence together.
Mhm.
Don't they sing
Oh,
cadence
yeah. Oh,
together?
yeah.
And you've been there, I've been there, and there's a unity that happens when you do
Very
this.
much. Yeah.
Okay, and so some of these traditions in the church, and in going back to the Old Testament, they would come together and they would have their instructions where the priests would lead them in community singing and praising of the Lord. They had the songs that they would sing.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that can be, and it's obviously hotly debated in a lot of places, but one of the things that happened in popular music in the 1900s that the church just experienced as they began to transition into more contemporary Christian music was more of our songs became narrative rather than reflective. That they told a story, and I mean, I think there's tons of Christian songs that they're popping in my head that are telling a story. This was my life, and then God came into it, and God changed it, and that's beautiful. But that's a narrative, as opposed to more of the hymns are reflective. How great Thou art,
Yeah. It's him focused, not
Yeah.
us focused too.
Yes. Yeah. Tell me the story of Jesus, write on my heart every word. Tell me the story most precious, sweetest that ever was. I'm reflecting on God and His greatness and His goodness, and they're also really powerful. And some of the more modern songs can do this. It's just it's less frequent. Is the theological things that we impart to not just the people, but that, as a guy that kind of got into ministry doing as a worship leader, I can get lost count of the number of times in the very atmosphere shifting in the participation of the people from a more performance driven, the music is driving it. We're getting people, as opposed to let's take the shift away from this really complicated musical pattern to something simple, with the words that are reflective. And you, like you said, you kind of tone it down a little bit and put the people get involved, and it just changes. It changes everything.
It
So
does. It really does.
totally agree.
A mighty fortress is our God.
Yeah.
That's reflective.
Mhm.
And again, we're talking about the awe.
Mhm.
And I think the hymns the historic hymns tended mostly to be about some aspect of reflecting and uplifting God, which would not only bring that community unity, but also, and to a great degree, I think, enhance our journey toward awe.
Oh yeah, a more modern version of saying, we talk about how great thou art. Chris Tomlin did this massive hit with how great is our God, but it's still that same mindset of it's reflective on God, not just telling a narrative. And I totally agree.
Yeah, and of course I've heard that one.
Yeah.
Okay, does it lend itself well for the music to stop and the church to continue to sing?
100%.
Yeah, and so that would be a place where
One of the ones I was thinking.
Yeah.
When I say that.
But those don't seem to be the common ones.
No. Because just because of it's a stylistic pop means popular, but the preference is we like to tell stories, and there's a really beautiful place for that. But when it comes to worship, we have to, and we talk about the law of worship. We become like what we focus on and admire. That has to be the focus and the admiration on God for worship to take place, rather than just telling a beautiful narrative. That's who I used to be. Holy Spirit, changed my life. I have a new heart, a new mind. Those are beautiful things, but they're not as reflective.
I was at a Christian organization, large, 7,000, 8,000 people in attendance, and they have professional musicians leading in worship, and the place is just, hands in the air, positive people. This is wonderful experience. But then, and this is it starts out every morning, the worship, and then they had the actual speaker come in, and the speaker in the middle of it, he gave a little talk, and he talked about the praise for God, and he pulled out a little what are those little things you blow and get a note?
Oh yeah. A tuning whistle. Yeah.
A tuning whistle. He blew it and said, would
Pitch
you sing the doxology with me? And he just went like this, and 7,000 people stood up, and it was awe-inspiring.
Yes.
It was totally different in every way from what was happening with the which was wonderful, incredible music. I'm not criticizing the music, but the experientially it was different.
Yes.
It was totally different. And there were tears in people's eyes. It just moved you in a different way. I don't know that I have a clear explanation for that, but I think there's a place for that in our worship.
Absolutely. And that's part of why the scripture tells us, for numerous reasons, not to forsake gathering together. Because when we gather together as a community and we share that experience, it's just powerful. I'd have no doubt as to why surrounding God's thrones, there's countless, heavenly beings adoring him, not because God's selfish, but because it's actually beneficial for them to come together in that community. And then we, will one day do the same thing.
I think what you're hitting on too, the when everyone begins doing it together like that, it pulls that focus away from maybe whoever is leading as well, to where then it's more of a collective group that is worshiping God. Because I still remember a time that we were at a conference, and it was like 3,000 college pastors came together. Crowder comes out, and so if you know Crowder, he's got this crazy hair. It's dark. You can see his hair as he's walking out to the piano, and everyone goes nuts. He sits there for like a minute until everyone got really quiet. He said, "Okay, are you done cheering me on now? And can we cheer on God?" And there was this weird moment of a bunch of pastors, oh, whoops, but he said, "I appreciate your love. Let's now love God." And it was amazing. And then all of us were singing and more engaged, I think, after that moment. So,
oh yeah, and it's a well-known fable. If not fable, it's truth. It's kind of like become of a church kind of story of Matt Redman doing something similar, where he basically said that their church community had gotten way too caught up in the technicality and the performance of the worship, and they actually stopped doing music in the church services for months. And that's where there's a song he wrote called "The Heart of Worship." I'm coming back to the heart of worship, and where it's all about you is actually what the lyrics say in the song. And that was that moment, where it's that God it's cool to we're talented, but we want to give you our talents, and it just shifts. And when we think about the awesomeness of it, I meant to share this podcast with you because I know we've talked a lot about like things like particle physics and stuff like that. It's fascinating. I listened to this podcast on a particle physicist talking about the universe And he's a jazz musician, and he was saying that the closer we get to understanding more of how the actual matter of the universe works together, it all resonates. And he has the podcast is titled the Music of the Universe. It's talking about how, and I thought to myself, how cool is it that if, I believe what the scriptures say, that God spoke, he made sound to create everything. By the word of the Lord, the heavens were made. Psalm 33 says, from the breath of his mouth come the starry host. And it's, that resonant frequency. I think that has part to do with it, that we're just echoing the way God created everything, and that the universe has a sound that God made, then we can give that back to him. That's really cool.
What you said there, goes back to, I think, part of why that, what we were just talking about, that community of singing versus putting headphones in and listening to music. You can listen to it, but when you're in the experience, whether it is a symphony orchestra, a choir, but you're in the presence of it, you're not only hearing it, those sound waves are going through your being. There's actual studies that show that if you sing regularly, walking around your house, singing, okay, it has a very positive effect on your sinuses, because you're putting resonance in those sound waves, and you have, a better, sinus health and so forth. And so there's something about the sound waves that are, and I don't know the whole science on that, but there is science on the impact of sound waves and how they travel through our being and have a impact on our health, just like there are light waves, and the light has an impact on us, because he made us as physical beings that are interacting in a world in which these are part of God's design and creation for us. As we wind this show up, anything you'd like to share with our audience about how they can make awe a more consistent experience in our life? Any thoughts on that?
I found just what works for me is very helpful to just set that time aside regularly. For me, it's mornings. Mornings just work for my schedule. But I just set aside time we've talked a lot about meditation, but I make it a point to, not just in my Bible study and prayer, but also to set aside time to say, I want to find something, whether I'm learning, whether I'm reflecting, whether I'm getting outside and looking at the stars, to recapture that wonder that the busyness of life can lose, to be intentional with it. And what I've learned is, over time, what we focus on grows, and that when I focus on finding those things, I'm constantly throughout the rest of the day finding those things throughout, kind of scattered throughout, that continue to help me hold on to it. And so just being intentional with recapturing the wonder of finding the awe in life by being learners, being reflectors, and getting connected with God, because only God is big enough in his infinity to always give us something
So
new.
you said starting out in the morning. So you're recommending that people make part of their daily routine, a carved out time for their morning meditation or morning devotion, morning time with the Lord. And that could be, maybe on a rainy day, they're reading a psalm. But on a nice day, maybe they're what's that? Remember the old hymn, I come to the garden alone?
Yeah.
They take a walk in the garden and have a conversation with the Lord, where the dew is still on the roses. Okay. Those types of experience. What are your thoughts, Brad?
Yeah, similar. I mean, I think the morning thing is actually really important. I think, just everyone can think of a time, maybe it's multiple times a week, that you're in a hurry and you're rushed, and you just are throwing your clothes on, you're getting everything done, and you get out the door. It just sets your day up for a little bit of a different feel. Let's just put it that way. Not necessarily disaster, but it starts your day off different. And, I would say, yes, finding something where you can have that quiet and that time with God. For me recently, actually, just in the last several months, I've started going on a walk in the morning, outside, and it's still dark, everyone's still sleeping, it's just, you're out there, you can see the stars, you're breathing fresh air, and it's just walking. It's also good for you, but it's just a walk, and it gives me just such a different way to start my day. Like today, I didn't have time necessarily to go on a walk, and so I don't think that's going to throw off my day, but for the most part, trying to get those times in, I think, makes a huge difference. And I think it does make a difference that it's in the morning.
Have to be intentional.
Yes.
You have to
do it.
you actually have to make this a decision of a daily routine. Like you brush your teeth every day, whatever. This is a routine. And that means you have to decide, what time is it that you need to get in the shower? What time is it you need to, if you're a lady, do your hair or your makeup? What time is it you need to leave the house? And then you say, okay, and so I have to get up to get all that. And then how much time am I going to have? And I back up and get up that much earlier.
Yep.
And a lot of people, it's like they got all the physical routines, shower, makeup, whatever, and time to get to the office. and they get up at the last minute and then get that stuff done, and they don't leave that time in the morning. And it may require, if you're going to have, let's say, a 30-minute time in the morning, that you'll have to go to bed 30 minutes earlier if you're going to actually stay healthy. I can tell you that, many people ask me all the time, it's actually a frequent question, how do you get so much done? How do you get so much done? I routinely get up between 5 and 5:30 every morning. Even though my day doesn't start, I usually try to get here about 7. But I get up, it gives me at least an hour to an hour and a half every morning, where I'll spend at least 30 minutes of that in my personal meditation and devotion with the Lord. And then typically, as soon as my meditative and devotional time's over, I usually launch into some additional Bible study, blog, some other still spiritual developmental application for the next hour or so is typically what I'm doing. This is what I do in the mornings. This is part of my routine. I think I might have to entertain the idea of maybe moving out of my office and having some time. I like that idea. It very much appeals to me. Yet I know if I do that, then I'm very productive. We do one of these a week. I write a weekly blog. I teach a weekly Bible study class, in addition to all my practice. And so, I'm just like, but yeah, that's I'd love that from my personal experience, but how will I share that with others? So I love that idea, but also at the walking in nature thing, I've done it some, yeah, of course, and I love it. But there's a difference walking in nature with your headphones in and without your headphones in. Even if you're listening to and sometimes I'll walk and I'll listen to sermons or Bible studies by other people or Christian music while I'm walking. All good stuff. But you make the best connection with nature when you don't have any of that.
Yes.
I find that I wind up in prayer a lot easier too.
When you don't have those things.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, yeah, it is.
Yes.
When you always have something going, and I admit, a lot of the times I have earbuds in when I'm doing this walk, but then other times when I don't, I do find that, well, part of it might even just be boredom, where I'm not engaged in anything except for just the walk, and I'm walking and I'm looking at nature. Next thing I know, I'm in a conversation with God. And there's something to that.
No, that's very real, and that's very beautiful. God put Adam and Eve in a sinless world in a garden. So getting out of nature without the distractions, I think, really does put one in a position to start having a conversation with the Lord. And I think that is awesome. I hope you've enjoyed our program today. Thanks for joining us. If you have questions, send those into questions@designformore.net, questions@designformore.net, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for joining us on Designed for More, brought to you by Come and Reason Ministries and Honey Lake Clinic. Also, don't forget to check out our other podcasts for more inspiring content.